Welcome to the High Sensory Mothers podcast, a space for intuitive mothers who experience the world deeply. You might know this as high sensitivity, being an HSP, or my preferred term is having high sensory intelligence. I'm your host, Karen Hunt. Let's dive into today's episode. Hi, and welcome to the High Sensory Mothers podcast. I'm your host, Karen Hunt. So today I'd like to talk about being productive and what that means for you. So I find that being productive is something I've always struggled with because the traditional view of productivity didn't really look like the kind of productivity that I felt capable of. It seems to always be tied to busyness and to-do lists and ticking things off, and there's a lot of doingness involved with being productive. And whilst, of course, there's a lot to be said for that, it doesn't always reflect who we are as sensitive mothers in the way that is healthy for us. So what I'd like to do with you today is just to consider a different type of productivity for us, something that's a bit more compassionate, really, and aligned more with our specific needs. So generally, people think about productivity in speed, in efficiency, in anything that you can measure to get things done, how much you get done. So that's the traditional way of looking at being productive. So when we're mothers, we will probably be spending a lot of our time caregiving. And in a way, it seems like a simple way to measure how we're being productive. But there's a lot of nuance, isn't there, involved? And I think when we look at the things that we actually physically have to do to look after a child, there's the obvious things like feeding them and washing them and changing their diapers, all those sorts of things. But, those things don't take that much time generally. It's more the hidden things that take time, like how you're interacting with them, how you're being with them. And that is a lot more difficult to measure, certainly in the short term. I think in the long run, you might see the results of the care that you have. Let's have a look at the impact of productivity in a traditional sense for us, because we need to follow through with how we're feeling. We need to honour the cycles that we experience within ourselves. We have different seasons. We have times when we have the energy that we can get things done in a more traditional sense. And then we have times when we need to sort of rest and recuperate, as does everybody. But for us, it's particularly important. And I think what can happen, and I know certainly in my case, I don't feel it now so much. I mean, it's still there a little bit, but nowhere near what it used to be. The impact of trying to be productive like everybody else can often lead to burnout and shame as well when we can't live up to these standards that society seems to have for us. And this chronic feeling of just not doing enough. And I think that's the thing. Our talent, our gift lies not in the doing so much as the being. And I think when we need to be in more of a being state for us to really capitalize on our sensitivity, that's when it can look like we're not doing enough. But other people, non-HSPs, may very well need to measure themselves and their productivity in what they can do rather than in what they can be. And we need to have plenty of time to rest, recuperate, and process. And when we do that, we are very productive, but just in a different way. So let's reframe this idea of productivity then, and let's look at it as being in alignment with your energy, your time, and your purpose too. We are productive in lots of different areas in our lives. So we tend to, as women, first of all, and then as HSPs as well, we tend to be very good at holding space for people and doing the emotional labor as well, very often in a family too. We are creative and we have this intuitive insight. We're able to build very secure relationships with our children and to really attune to them and to other people as well. We can also process, as I said before, we can process thoughts very deeply, and we can also process feelings as well and emotions. And we attune to really what matters most when we're given that opportunity to do that kind of work. So let's have a look a little bit further in depth when it comes to these different areas of life and how we can be more productive, but just reframing that in a different way. So what I'd encourage you to do is to map out the different roles that you have in life. So first of all, you are your own person. So you can look at yourself as an individual, a soul on this earth, just yourself. Nobody else involved, no other role involved, just you. Then, of course, your role as a mother and as part of a family. What about the work that you do, or the business that you have, or the one that you would like to build and grow and create? That's a different role there. All the different types of relationships that you have, that's a different role as well. Your home, the space, your environment that you live in, that you work in, and have a look at your personal health and well-being as well. And that's slightly different from the first one we were looking at, which is yourself, your soul, your being. And then, how you express yourself in a creative way as well, or perhaps you might feel more attuned to your spiritual self, whichever sort of works for you. So I'd encourage you to have a look at what is meaningful productivity for you in each of those areas. So for example, in parenting, it might be more about you being present with your children rather than, multitasking and trying to get the washing on while you get the food, while you're paying attention to your daughter and listening to them talking about their day at school, or, all these different things. Like, how can you simplify your life and your tasks so that you can achieve the thing that's most important to you? So, for example, that could be just being present with them. And there are ways that you can do that. Like, for example, you could spend 10 minutes with them when they get home from school and just be with them at that point. And it could be a discussion. It could be just something that you agree ahead of time that this is what I'm going to do for you. Then what I need to do, perhaps with your help, is to do some laundry or get the dinner ready or whatever it may be. So I think it's about identifying what's most important to you and then taking that information and co-creating with your family, in this case, co-creating what that looks like, what you would like to be like, what they need, and then sort of creating this opportunity for that connection. Another example could be in terms of taking care of your health and well-being. I don't know if you feel like this, but sometimes I've got this goal in mind of what I want to do that day. And then for some reason, my body is feeling so tired and my mind is tired, and I just need to close my eyes and just rest. And, it could be a 10-minute rest. It could be a 30-minute rest with a meditation or something like that. And I have to let go of the expectation that I had of what I wanted to produce, because actually my body's telling me I need to do something else. There's absolutely no point trying to push through. I will be more productive when it comes to the rest of the day if I just take that 10 minutes now just to close my eyes and just rest. I probably process too much for me to continue. And I know that sometimes I get excited about something and I just want to keep going. And I've learned I must just listen to my body, because if I don't, my body will shout louder and louder until I do. Something that I will always remember is that I had a boyfriend when I was at college, and his mother was French. And I went over to visit him and stayed with his family. And I just remember being so amazed at his mother, who her role was homemaker. And she had a husband and she had 2 sons. And when I was there, she would shop for food, she would make meals, she would do laundry, she would clean the home. That was her job. And she would plan her meals out. She knew exactly what she was doing. And she took time off. She just would sit in the garden in her bikini and sunbathe. No guilt, no shame, which I found quite surprising, because in my family, everyone always had to be busy. My mum was, and still is, a bit of a productive powerhouse. When she had a job and she left that job, they would have to have more people replace her than just one, because nobody could keep up with her level of productivity. And so I came from that environment of doing fast and doing well and doing a lot. And so it was a bit of a revelation to me that you don't have to always be doing something. You can take the time to rest, relax. She would sit out in the garden, enjoy her, couple of hours or whatever free time in between prepping meals or cleaning or doing laundry. And she would just read a book. And I just found that really amazing, frankly. And so it's taken me quite a long time. I had to get through the majority of my motherhood journey, sort of trying to get to that point where I could do that. And I'm not quite at that level. And I don't know if this is particularly a cultural thing or not, but I think it's interesting to pay attention to where you came from and to evaluate that and to decide for yourself, does this feel useful? Does this feel in alignment with who I want to be and how I want to live my life? And I think particularly I'm a great believer in modeling for our children. We do it regardless of whether we're doing it consciously or not. And unfortunately, that's something that I've learnt when my children had already grown up. And so although we may have a certain intention for our children, the very way we behave and we act ourselves means that the message we want them to absorb might not be the one that they do absorb. So it's something to pay attention to. How do we model this behaviour to our children? And, what does that actually mean? So let's have a look at this whole concept of lightening our mental load. Because just being a woman, as I said at the beginning, we do tend to carry a lot of this. We think about what needs to be done, who needs to do it, where we need to be, and we might take that on for everybody in our family. We may also do that in a work sense as well. So it's a lot of work when you're trying to remember things, you're trying to manage everything, you're anticipating what everybody needs. Is it you that thinks about what I need to take when we go on a trip? with our family? Is it you that thinks about all the preparation? Is it you that thinks about just, day to day for school lunches, for example, or snacks after school? You're doing all that work mentally, and it's a lot and it's exhausting. And then we do all that, which is invisible work, really. And then we need to, turn our attention to what is really, quote unquote, the productive stuff. So I would invite you to consider that and then think about where or how are there ways where you can actually unburden yourself from all this responsibility. Is there a way of releasing some of this? Is there a way of sharing the load with someone? You might be able to delegate some of this, have discussions about it. It could be that you can delegate some of this to AI as well, to help you with planning and preparation for things. Or there's a partner that you can share this load with. And sometimes we have to be quite clear on the work that's actually being done by us that's seemingly invisible. It might be that you just write things down so that that's very clear, very obvious of actually what happens when you're doing this invisible work. And just like my boyfriend's mother, are there times when you can just switch off? Can you just be? Or are you always on? Can you just say no and just cut off from, thinking, well, all the washing up still needs doing, or there needs to be more laundry done, or, I've got all this work to do, but now it's the evening. And, can you really set up boundaries around these things and just make sure that you appreciate how important this downtime is for you to rest, to recuperate, to process? Because a lot of what you're doing and being productive is this unseen. It's in this unseen way. So, do give yourselves credit for all that you're holding, all that you're being, and all that you're doing. You're already holding so much. It's really not about doing more. It's about honoring what you're already carrying and choosing what matters most to you. So perhaps just reflect on this. Reflect on what it is that you've actually been doing this week or today that is unseen. It's not visible, but you've been doing it. And where is it that you can be productive in a way that supports your energy? So I hope this was helpful to you to really consider how productive you are and what your definition of productivity is, so that it really makes space for a slower pace, to honour your sensitivity and to honour your own truth, your own being as well. Okay, I will leave it there for now. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Bye for now. Enjoyed today's episode? If you haven't already, I'd be so grateful if you could subscribe and leave a quick review. It really does help other high sensory mothers discover this podcast. To stay connected, visit my website where you can sign up to receive episode updates straight to your inbox. Or book a free call if you're curious about working together. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to next time when I'll share more insights on embracing your high sensory gifts.